Welcome to CareyBrosPros, the podcast for construction pros by construction pros. Now, here are James and Morris Carey.
So glad that you've tuned in to this episode of CareyBrosPros. And yes, we are contractors and we are brothers. I'm Morris.
And I'm James. And on this episode of CareyBrosPros, we get the chance to speak with David Lupberger. David's president of Master Builder Group, Inc. They're a custom renovation and home building company. And he's also the author of Managing the Emotional Homeowner. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm glad to be here.
In 30 plus years of remodeling, I think it would be safe to say that we've had one or two emotional homeowners, wouldn't you say?
I have this adage that I've lived by in remodeling, which is that 70% through the job, the customer usually falls apart. And that's pretty much a commonplace occurrence.
You know, interestingly, David submitted a graph which is entitled The Homeowner's Emotional Roller Coaster, which I suspect is part of the book.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I have to tell you, and Morris will remember this, that on your graph, you show the design as a high point, and then you show the working drawings as a high point, and then you show things going down with the bidding process, and then contract is kind of almost at a downward curve. I can remember one client where we had gone through that and got to the contract, and the client literally started crying.
Oh.
Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it was such an emotional experience. Of course, later on we met in court, but nonetheless, that's another story for another day.
Yes.
But curiously, why did you write the book, David? And for whom is it written? Is it written for pros like us? Is it written for homeowners considering the remodeling experience to help them get through it? What was the motivation?
It's written for the pro. And can I just give you a brief story of where it came from?
Please.
So I'm remodeling in Washington, D.C., A friend of mine calls. This is a true story. A friend of mine calls and says, my psychiatrist wants to talk to you. I said, well, that's kind of intriguing. So we meet a time to meet at lunch. I get there, and he's there with the marriage counselor partner from his psychiatric practice, not his personal partner, a business partner.
Wow.
I sit down, and within about 3 minutes, understand that both of them had done major remodeling projects in the previous 12 to 18 months. Both of them were still upset. And for about 20 minutes, they both vented their frustrations in regards to what didn't happen, promises that weren't kept, expectations that weren't maintained, just their disappointment with the entire process. And in listening to this, I said, what were you hoping I could do? And they said, in many cases, all homeowners can do is complain to their friends. We wanted you as a professional to hear what we went through. And then I said, I thought about putting together a manual to show homeowners how to better prepare for the process. And he stopped me. And I remember because he's shaking his finger at me with very vivid impression. And he said, you're missing my point. Homeowners only go through this once or twice. Contractors do this again and again. You know how to build. You understand how construction comes together. What you don't understand is how to manage people's emotions. If you did, you would change your industry. That stuck with me, and that's where the book came from.
Wow. Before we go any further, where might one acquire the book?
They can just email me. I just discovered today that I had a free link on my website. And if you understand technology, sometimes these links disappear. So if they just emailed me, I'm happy to send them a digital copy of the book.
And the email address is?
David@remodelforce.com, just like it sounds.
May the force be with you.
Yeah.
May the force be with us all.
All right. So how does a professional manage the expectations?
That's what we're always talking about.
Yeah.
Manage a customer's expectations. Don't tell them that it's going to be $200,000 if you're not sure. Don't offer them information which you can't back up.
You'll relate to this. We don't just sell a project. We sell an experience. So it's my job from the very first appointment, and you just said it, it's my job to begin setting clear expectations. And there's some landmines because sometimes people are watching some of these home improvement shows. And home improvement shows make these jobs look effortless. They give pricing that isn't realistic, and everybody's having a good time. And so right from the beginning, it's my job as the professional to begin really sharing with people what the process is. I can share the roller coaster with them, but also tell them I'll guide them every step of the way. Can I share another analogy with you?
Please, and I just want to say this before you do. Thank you so much for weighing in on these shows. They truly are a double-edged sword. They create an interest in and demand for what we all do, which is wonderful. But they are equally poor at painting a very unrealistic picture as regards to both the level of disruption, the amount of time that it takes to accomplish a particular task, and completely and totally unrealistic budgets.
And they call them reality shows. And that's the irony, which is those are entertainment shows.
Yeah.
They're not really about the reality of the remodeling process.
All right, your story.
Okay. So about 2 years ago, I had to get a knee replacement. Had injured myself, athletically, and they finally said, let's just start over. So before I could get the knee replacement, I had to go to 2 joint replacement classes. And going through these classes was illuminating because here's my analogy. Custom remodeling is just like elective surgery. Now, elective surgery, you make a choice. Custom remodeling, you make a choice. So let's look at the items around elective surgery. Number 1, it's very invasive. Number 2, the outcome is uncertain. Number 3, you hope you pick the right doctor. And number 4, it can be very expensive. Now let's jump over to remodeling. People start the process in design, and the outcome is very uncertain. It's going to be very invasive. They hope that they pick the right contractor, and it can be very expensive. I can't emphasize enough the emotional undercurrent that's present in any remodeling project. You're in people's personal space. You're around their children. So you're selling trust. You're selling your promises, your commitments. They don't have distinctions. Are the cabinets, perfectly level? Are the miters perfectly tight? They don't have those distinctions, but they do know how they've been treated. So my job, and the surgeons, they did this in the prep for the knee replacement. Those meetings were all about managing the patient expectations. What's going to happen? How do you prepare? What do you do to get ready? Here's what we do to get ready. Here's what's going to happen during surgery. Here's what happens afterwards. And my point in all this is, why aren't we doing the same thing? And setting people up to succeed. And honestly, I do this. This is also a nice qualifier. After doing this for 30 years, as you both have, I know what works. So I'm going to review my process and procedures with a client. If a potential client doesn't want to follow my process, honestly, they're not my client. I know what works. Will they let me do my job? Does that make sense?
We call that a red flag. That's red flag number 1.
Bingo.
You know what? The moment that you begin, and I'm speaking to you, the pro listening, the moment you begin to alter or mold or customize your business to meet the expectations of a client rather than using your tried and true methods, that is the first step toward disaster.
We can't give up control, and that's why, to me, the surgical analogy is so appropriate. You don't walk into a surgeon and say, I was on WebMD, and I noticed that this, and this. Now, if I've got a guy that's done 5,000 knee surgeries, I'm going to trust him to do his job. I know he's good at what he does. And I'm guessing both of you, have you done probably around 1,000 jobs, if not more?
Maybe 2,000, 3,000.
Yes. So we know what works. It's our job to educate, loosely speaking, the homeowner and say, this is what we do. This is how we do it. This is why we do it. And I always follow that up with, will you let me do my job?
And David, to your point, technology really has been wonderful by creating an awareness of the benefits associated with a remodel and, wow, what a new kitchen will look like and that new bathroom or additional space, whatever, and creates demand for us, and access to information on products is wonderful with tablets and all of that and the internet. But it also can, for some, cause this false sense of empowerment where they believe they now are armed with enough knowledge to be a project manager or to be a contractor, and that is very dangerous, very dangerous.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes we don't find out about that customer characteristic until midway through the job, no matter how hard we try in the beginning. We do a lot of very hard qualifying, trying to eliminate clientele by virtue of their initial attitude when we first meet. You know, I drew this plan, and the minute I hear I drew this plan, I'd say, geez, that's just gorgeous. And I'd say, but you know what? That project's too big for us. We just won't be able to do it. Okay. Because anyone who does a design has no respect for what we do. They feel that if they're capable of drawing it, they're capable of managing it. And I don't want to be any part of that.
Well, and can I give you one little tip that I finally learned about how to identify the problem homeowner before the job even starts?
Yes, please.
So it can be really blatant, which is I'm walking in and the homeowner says, you know, I fired my previous two contractors. I'm sure you'll be different. That's probably as clear as it can be.
Yeah.
But it's usually different. It's much more subtle. You can notice that there's an interaction between the two spouses that are disrespectful. There could be something done with you that's disrespectful. There's something that doesn't fit.
Right.
And I'm going to see if I can capture this and see what you think. When I've sat with problem clients, I usually know something doesn't feel right. There isn't a green light. I mean, in my gut, I can feel it, which is something's off on this. It took me several years to literally begin to pay attention. If something doesn't feel right, there's a reason.
Yep.
And I've told contractors, if it doesn't feel right, stop. And as a backup to that, when I would feel that, I would then bring my project manager to the next client meeting because he was not emotionally involved. He would sit through the meeting. As we walked to the car, I would turn to him and say, what do you think? And he would always give me this unsolicited feedback, something along the lines, if you take that job, I quit. But he would tell me what he saw and what he felt. Does that all make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And we do the same thing. If there's more than one of us that has visited the project, you know, I think a lot of people, and we're in a position in an industry where people expect a free estimate. And that can be a major undertaking for someone in our position. It can require a lot of time and a lot of energy. And so if you're willing to invest that time and energy, you at least need to feel good about who it is you're going to be engaging and that they are legitimately a prospect and not just a tire kicker.
Actually, we don't offer free estimates because our estimates for a major remodel can take, weeks of drawings and in order to be accurate. So what we do is we suggest a design agreement. We'll design it for you, and we'll work on it until the permits are ready, and we'll work on it till you're happy. And
I'm very clear that if I'm putting my time into a project or an estimate, if I'm investing time, the homeowner must also make an investment. So there's some kind of payment in kind, and I do that for two reasons. One is they're making an investment, number one, but number two, even if it's just for $300, $400, $500, once they write that check for the design agreement, I've taken them off the market because they're not going to do that with anybody else.
That's right.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I want to speak to, for a moment, David, a couple of things that may resonate with our audience. And for those who it doesn't resonate, then it's a good wake-up call. One is managing expectations. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make in our position is quoting unrealistic budgets to say, well, if someone is looking at a kitchen, they say, well, that's going to be, $97,000.